The galaxy was vast, filled with stars that twinkled like diamonds against the endless blackness. For centuries, humanity had looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what lay beyond. When they finally reached the stars, it seemed as though those dreams would come true. But dreams often turn into nightmares when reality sets in. Daniel Carter stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Aurora Dawn, staring out at the swirling nebula outside. He was a tall man with sharp features and dark hair streaked with gray. His eyes reflected both wonder and worry as he watched the colors dance across the void. Daniel had spent most of his life studying the stars, but lately his focus had shifted to something far more troubling: the growing tension between humans and the alien civilizations they'd encountered. Humanity's arrival in the galaxy hadn't gone as smoothly as people back on Earth had hoped. At first, everything seemed fine. Humans explored new worlds, discovered alien species, and marveled at the diversity of life scattered among the stars. But soon, problems began to arise. Humans wanted resources, minerals, fuel, and land to sustain their ever-expanding population. The aliens, however, weren't so eager to share. Many of them viewed these demands as intrusive, even disrespectful. Daniel sighed deeply as he turned away from the window. He walked over to a console where data streams flickered across the screen. Lines of text scrolled by too quickly for anyone else to read, but Daniel didn't need to look closely. He knew exactly what the reports said. Alien leaders were growing impatient with Earth's refusal to negotiate fairly. Diplomatic channels were breaking down, and tensions were rising fast. Back on Earth, no one seemed to care about the warnings. Politicians dismissed alien grievances as irrelevant, claiming humanity had every right to take what it needed. "We're the superior species," they argued. "Why should we bow to creatures who can't even speak our language?" It was arrogance, pure and simple, and Daniel feared it would lead to disaster. Rachel Bennett sat in her small office aboard the Aurora Dawn, listening intently to a transmission she'd intercepted earlier that day. She was a young woman with short brown hair and piercing green eyes. Her job was to monitor communications from alien ships and relay important messages to Earth. This particular message, however, wasn't meant for human ears. It came from the Conquered Alliance, a coalition of alien species united under a single banner. Their voices were calm but firm. "Your refusal to coexist will no longer be tolerated," the message said. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine as she replayed the recording. She knew this wasn't just rhetoric, it was a warning. The Conquered Alliance had tried talking to Earth before, but their attempts at diplomacy had been ignored or outright rejected. Now they were done asking. Rachel saved the file and forwarded it to Earth Command, hoping someone there would listen. But deep down, she doubted they would. Over the past few years, she'd sent dozens of similar messages, each one more urgent than the last. None of them had made a difference. Still, she couldn't give up. If there was even a slim chance of avoiding war, she had to try. Meanwhile, light years away, Ethan Brooks prepared for another patrol mission. He was a soldier stationed on the edge of human-controlled space, tasked with defending mining operations from potential threats. Ethan was a rugged man in his late 20s, with broad shoulders and calloused hands, earned through years of hard work. He didn't think much about politics or diplomacy. His job was to follow orders and keep people safe. Lately, though, things had gotten complicated. Ethan's unit had been deployed to protect a mining outpost in the Andromeda sector. The facility extracted rare minerals from an asteroid belt, resources vital to Earth's economy. What the miners didn't know, or perhaps didn't care about, was that this region was sacred to the Jirachians, one of the most powerful members of the Concord Alliance. To them, the asteroids weren't just rocks. They were part of their history, their culture, their identity. Tensions had been simmering for weeks. The Jirachians demanded that the mining operations cease immediately, but Earth's leaders refused to budge. They claimed the area fell within human territory and therefore belonged to them. Ethan could see how this argument might sound reasonable to someone sitting comfortably on Earth, but out here on the frontier, it felt hollow. Every time he looked into the glowing eyes of a Jirakian scout hovering nearby, he sensed their anger and their pain. One evening, after returning from a deep, long shift, Ethan sat alone in the mess hall picking at a plate of bland food. The room was quiet except for the hum of machinery in the background. He glanced up as Rachel's voice crackled over the intercom system, relaying yet another intercepted message from the Conquered Alliance. This one was different, though. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a declaration. If you do not withdraw your forces from our sacred grounds within 7 cycles, we will have no choice but to act, the voice said. Ethan frowned as he listened. 7 cycles. That wasn't much time. He wondered if anyone back on Earth realized how serious this situation had become. Probably not. To them, it was just another skirmish in some distant corner of the galaxy. Out here, it felt like the calm before a storm. Daniel Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. He spent hours poring over data, analyzing patterns, and trying to predict the Conquered Alliance's next move. Everything pointed to one conclusion: war. Not a minor conflict either, but a full-scale assault on human colonies across the galaxy. The thought kept him awake at night, staring at the ceiling while scenarios played out in his mind. He decided to take matters into his own hands. If Earth's leaders wouldn't listen to reason, maybe someone else would. Daniel drafted a proposal, outlining steps humanity could take to de-escalate tensions and rebuild trust with alien species. He included detailed plans for diplomatic outreach, resource-sharing agreements, and cultural exchange programs. It was ambitious, perhaps overly optimistic, but it was better than doing nothing. When he presented his ideas to Captain Lewis, the commander of the Aurora Dawn, the response was lukewarm at best. "It's a nice thought, Daniel," Lewis said with a weary smile, "but you know how stubborn Earth can be. They won't change course now." Daniel nodded slowly, disappointment weighing heavily on his shoulders. Still, he refused to give up. He reached out to Rachel, knowing she shared his concerns. Together, they began brainstorming ways to get their message heard. Maybe if enough people spoke out, someone in power would finally listen. As days passed, the atmosphere aboard the Aurora Dawn grew increasingly tense. Crew members whispered nervously in corridors, speculating about what might happen next. Some believed war was inevitable. Others clung to hope that cooler heads would prevail. Rachel worked tirelessly, intercepting transmissions and piecing together fragments of information. Each new discovery added to the mounting evidence that humanity was standing on the brink of catastrophe. Ethan continued his patrols, keeping a watchful eye on the Jirakian scouts. Occasionally, he caught glimpses of their sleek ships darting through the asteroid field, their movements graceful yet deliberate. He couldn't help but admire their technology and their resolve. These weren't primitive beings, as some on Earth liked to claim. They were intelligent, proud, and fiercely protective of their way of life. One night, as Ethan drifted off to sleep, he dreamed of home. He pictured fields of golden wheat swaying in the breeze, children laughing as they chased fireflies under a starry sky. It was a peaceful image, a reminder of why he'd joined the military in the first place, to protect the future, not destroy it. But as he woke the next morning, the dream faded, replaced by the harsh reality of his surroundings. The countdown continued. 6 cycles remained until the Jirakians' ultimatum expired. Back on Earth, protests erupted in major cities as citizens demanded answers from their leaders. Why hadn't they negotiated? What gave them the right to gamble with humanity's fate? Voices of dissent grew louder, echoing across news feeds and social media platforms. For the first time, cracks appeared in Earth's united front. On board, The Aurora Dawn, Daniel and Rachel watched the unfolding chaos with mixed emotions. They knew public pressure might force Earth's government to reconsider its stance. But would it be enough? Time was running out, and the stakes had never been higher. Far away, in the heart of the Concord Alliance, alien leaders convened to discuss their strategy. While some advocated for immediate action, others urged caution. Humanity was unpredictable. They argued, capable of both great cruelty and surprising compassion. Perhaps there was still a chance to avoid bloodshed, if only they could find common ground. For now, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see which path humanity would choose. Would they continue down the road of arrogance and aggression, or would they take a step back and seek peace? The answer would shape not just their own destiny, but the fate of countless other species scattered among the stars. And so the stage was set. The pieces were in motion, hurtling toward an outcome no one could fully anticipate. All Daniel, Rachel, and Ethan could do was brace themselves and hope that somehow, against all odds, humanity would make the right choice. The galaxy erupted into chaos. The countdown that had loomed over humanity like a storm cloud finally reached 0, and the Zirakians acted swiftly. Their sleek ships descended upon the mining outpost in the Andromeda sector with terrifying precision. Ethan Brooks watched from the cockpit of his fighter as beams of energy tore through the facility, reducing months of hard work to rubble. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, their flashes reflected in his wide eyes. Ethan's unit scrambled to respond, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The Zirakians' technology was far superior, and their tactics left no room for error. Ethan's heart pounded as he maneuvered his ship through the debris field, dodging enemy fire while trying to protect his comrades. He could hear panicked voices crackling over the comms system, some shouting orders, others pleading for help. It was clear this wasn't just an attack, it was a message. Humanity had ignored the warnings, and now the conquered alliance was making its point loud and clear. Back on Earth, news of the assault spread like wildfire. Images of destroyed colonies and burning cities dominated every screen, sparking outrage and fear. People gathered in streets, holding candles or signs, demanding answers. "Why didn't we listen?" became a common refrain. Protesters shouted at government buildings, accusing leaders of greed and short-sightedness. For years, Earth's politicians had dismissed alien grievances as irrelevant, claiming humanity deserved dominance in the galaxy. Now those decisions were coming back to haunt them. Rachel Bennett sat in her office aboard the Aurora Dawn, staring at the latest reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Alien fleets had launched coordinated attacks on human settlements, targeting infrastructure and crippling supply lines. Communication channels buzzed with desperate calls for reinforcements, but Earth's military forces were stretched thin. Rachel clenched her fists as she read the casualty numbers, each one representing lives lost because of arrogance and stubbornness. She thought about Ethan, stationed on the front lines, and wondered if he was still alive. She hadn't heard from him since the attack began, and the silence weighed heavily on her mind. Rachel knew she couldn't sit idly by while the galaxy burned around her. She had intercepted messages suggesting that the conquered alliance wasn't united in its aggression. Some factions opposed the war entirely. If she could find a way to reach those dissenting voices, maybe there was still hope for peace. Daniel Carter paced anxiously in the research lab, his mind racing with possibilities. He had spent weeks drafting proposals for diplomacy, only to have them dismissed by Earth's leaders. Now, as the war escalated, he realized time was running out. Humanity couldn't win this fight alone. They needed allies. But how could they earn trust after years of hostility? Daniel stopped pacing and stared at the wall, searching for inspiration. Then it hit him. A risky idea, but one worth trying. He hurried to Rachel's office, knocking softly before stepping inside. She looked up from her desk, her green eyes tired but alert. "We need to act," Daniel said without preamble. "If we can prove that not all humans are like our leaders, if we show the aliens that we're willing to change, maybe we can stop this." Rachel nodded slowly, understanding what he meant. "But how? We're stuck here on the Aurora Dawn, light years away from the fighting." "We have access to information," Daniel replied. "And we have connections. What if we reached out directly to neutral parties within the conquered alliance? Maybe they can help us broker a ceasefire." Rachel hesitated, considering the risks. Reaching out to alien factions without authorization would be seen as treason back on Earth. But doing nothing felt worse. Finally, she sighed and nodded again. "All right, let's do it." Together, they began combing through intercepted transmissions, looking for any mention of dissent within the Concord Alliance. Hours turned into days as they pieced together fragments of conversations and cross-referenced data. At last, they found something promising, a reference to a faction called the Kalari Syndicate, known for advocating peaceful coexistence. According to the messages, the Kalari were uneasy about the war and might be open to negotiation. While Daniel and Rachel worked behind the scenes, Ethan fought desperately to survive. His unit had been pushed back to a remote outpost on the edge of the conflict zone, where supplies were dwindling and morale was low. Soldiers huddled together in cramped quarters, sharing stories of loved ones back home and wondering if they'd ever see them again. Ethan tried to stay strong for his team, but inside he felt hollow. The endless cycle of violence was wearing him down. One night, as Ethan stood guard outside the outpost, he spotted a strange vessel approaching. Its design was unfamiliar, neither human nor belonging to any known alien species. He raised his weapon cautiously, ready to defend himself, but the ship didn't attack. Instead, it hovered silently, projecting a holographic image into the air. The figure that appeared was humanoid, with smooth blue skin and large almond-shaped eyes. "Human soldier," the figure said in halting English. "We mean you no harm. We seek peace." Ethan lowered his weapon slightly, stunned. "Who are you?" he asked. "We are Kalari," the figure replied. "We oppose this war. Tell us, are there others among your kind who wish to end the bloodshed?" Ethan hesitated, unsure whether to trust the stranger. But something in the Kalari's voice sounded sincere. "There are," he said finally, "but they don't speak for Earth's leaders." The Kalari nodded. "Then perhaps they can speak for themselves. Bring them to us, and we will listen." Before Ethan could respond, the hologram vanished, and the ship disappeared into the void. He stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Could this be the opportunity humanity needed? Or was it another trap? Either way, he knew he had to report it. Meanwhile, Daniel and Rachel received Ethan's transmission with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The Kalari Syndicate was exactly the kind of ally they'd been hoping to find, but reaching them wouldn't be easy. They would need to leave the safety of the Aurora Dawn and travel deep into alien territory, a journey fraught with danger. Captain Lewis listened carefully as Daniel and Rachel explained their plan. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "You realize this is insane, right?" he said. "If Earth Command finds out, they'll charge you with treason." "I know," Daniel admitted. "But what's the alternative? Keep letting people die while we wait for someone else to fix things?" Lewis sighed heavily, knowing they were right. "All right," he said reluctantly. "I'll cover for you. But if you get caught, don't expect me to bail you out." With the captain's reluctant blessing, Daniel and Rachel prepared for their mission. They gathered supplies, encrypted sensitive data, and plotted a course to the Kalari's last known location. As they boarded a small shuttlecraft, Rachel glanced back at the Aurora Dawn, feeling a pang of guilt. Leaving the ship and the crew behind felt like abandoning her post. But she reminded herself why she was doing this. If they succeeded, it could mean the difference between survival and extinction for humanity. The journey was tense and exhausting. Every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to alien-controlled space, where detection meant certain death. Along the way, they encountered remnants of shattered human fleets drifting lifelessly among the stars. Each ghost ship served as a grim reminder of the cost of war. Rachel recorded their locations, hoping to send rescue teams once peace was restored. As they neared the Kelari's territory, Daniel and Rachel braced themselves for the worst. Would the aliens welcome them, or would they be met with hostility? The uncertainty gnawed at them, but they pressed on, driven by a shared belief that change was possible. Finally, they arrived at a massive space station orbiting a dying star. Its surface shimmered with iridescent panels, reflecting the faint glow of the collapsing sun. Daniel guided the shuttle toward a docking bay, his hands trembling on the controls. As they landed, a group of Kelari emerged to greet them, their expressions unreadable. One of the aliens stepped forward, taller than the rest, with intricate markings etched into its skin. "You are brave to come here," it said in fluent English. "Or perhaps foolish. Which is it?" Daniel swallowed hard, meeting the alien's gaze. "We're desperate," he admitted. "Our leaders made mistakes, terrible ones, but not all of us agree with their choices. We want to make things right." The Kelari studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. Speak your piece, but know this. If we sense deception, we will not hesitate to act." Rachel stepped forward, holding out a data crystal containing evidence of humanity's suffering and calls for reform. "This is proof that many humans want peace," she said. "Please, give us a chance to show you we're capable of change." The Kelari took the crystal, examining it briefly before handing it to one of their companions. "We will review your claims," the leader said, "but time is short. The Concord Alliance grows restless, and not all share our desire for diplomacy." Daniel nodded, relief washing over him. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, humanity still had a chance to save itself. As they waited for the Kelari's decision, Daniel and Rachel reflected on everything that had led them here. The arrogance of Earth's leaders, the sacrifices of soldiers like Ethan, and the countless lives lost in the name of pride. They knew. The Kelari space station was unlike anything Daniel Carter or Rachel Bennett had ever seen. Its halls shimmered with soft, pulsating lights that seemed alive, shifting colors in response to movement. The air carried a faint hum, a sound neither human nor mechanical, but something in between. As they followed their Kelari guide through the labyrinthine corridors, Daniel and Rachel exchanged nervous glances. They were walking into the unknown, trusting strangers who could just as easily turn them away or worse. Their guide led them to a large chamber filled with holographic displays floating in midair. Each projection showed different parts of the galaxy: human colonies under siege, alien fleets mobilizing, and neutral zones caught in the crossfire. At the center of the room stood an elder Kelari, taller and more adorned than the others, with intricate patterns glowing faintly on its skin. This was Kelthar, the leader of the syndicate. His presence commanded respect, even from humans who had never met his kind before. "You have come far," Kelthar said, his voice calm, but firm. "Speak plainly. Why should we trust you?" Daniel stepped forward, his heart pounding. He took a deep breath and began explaining everything. The arrogance of Earth's leaders, the protests erupting across human cities, and the growing number of people demanding change. He spoke of Ethan Brooks and the soldiers fighting against impossible odds, not because they believed in conquest, but because they wanted to protect their families. He admitted humanity's mistakes openly, knowing honesty was their only chance. Rachel added her own perspective, sharing recordings of intercepted messages from Earth. She played clips of citizens shouting for peace, scientists urging reform, and children holding signs that read, "We want to live." Her voice trembled as she described the devastation caused by the war, not just to humans, but to alien species as well. "We're not all like our leaders," she said. "Some of us believe in coexistence. Please give us a chance." Kael'thar listened intently, his glowing eyes never leaving theirs. When they finished speaking, he turned to consult quietly with other Kalari elders. The wait felt endless. Daniel and Rachel stood silently, trying to gauge the reactions of the aliens around them. Finally, Kael'thar faced them again. "We will consider your plea," he said, "but know this. Trust must be earned. Prove to us, and to the conquered alliance, that humanity is capable of change." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. For now, that was enough. Back on Earth, chaos reigned. Cities burned as riots spread, fueled by anger and fear. Protesters clashed with police, demanding answers from their leaders. In government buildings, officials scrambled to respond to the escalating crisis. Some argued for surrender, while others pushed for an all-out counterattack against the conquered alliance. The division among Earth's rulers mirrored the turmoil in the streets. Amid the chaos, a young journalist named Laura Dawson risked her life to uncover the truth. Armed with a camera and a notebook, she traveled to war-torn regions, documenting the suffering of ordinary people. Her reports painted a vivid picture of the cost of arrogance and greed. Images of displaced families, destroyed homes, and grieving loved ones flooded news outlets worldwide, forcing humanity to confront the consequences of its actions. Laura's work caught the attention of influential figures, including a retired general named Samuel Hayes. Once a staunch supporter of Earth's expansionist policies, Hayes had grown disillusioned after witnessing the horrors of war firsthand. He reached out to Laura, offering his expertise and connections to amplify her message. Together, they launched a grassroots campaign to pressure Earth's leaders into pursuing peace. "Enough blood has been spilled," Hayes declared during a televised interview. "If we don't act now, there won't be a future for any of us." His words resonated with millions, sparking renewed calls for diplomacy. For the first time, cracks began to form in Earth's united front. Politicians who had once dismissed alien grievances found themselves facing backlash from constituents unwilling to support further violence. Public opinion was shifting, and with it, the balance of power. On the front lines, Ethan Brooks continued to fight, though his faith in humanity's cause wavered daily. His unit had been relocated to defend a critical supply route, a task made nearly impossible by relentless attacks from alien forces. Supplies dwindled, morale plummeted, and casualties mounted. Yet despite the grim circumstances, Ethan refused to give up. He reminded his comrades why they were fighting, not for glory or conquest, but for survival. One evening, as Ethan sat alone outside the makeshift barracks, a fellow soldier approached him. Her name was Maria Lopez, a medic known for her kindness and resilience. She handed him a cup of lukewarm coffee, sitting beside him without a word. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars twinkle above. "I heard about what happened with the Kalari," Maria said finally. "Do you think they'll help us?" Ethan shrugged, unsure how to answer. "I don't know. But if anyone can make them listen, it's Carter and Bennett." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "They're risking everything for this. We should do the same." Her words struck a chord with Ethan. He realized that waiting passively for orders wasn't enough. If humanity hoped to survive, they needed to take matters into their own hands. Inspired by Maria's determination, Ethan began rallying his unit, encouraging them to share stories of hope and resistance. Slowly but surely, their spirits lifted. Meanwhile, Daniel and Rachel worked tirelessly to build bridges with the Kailari. They spent hours answering questions, providing evidence, and addressing concerns. It was exhausting, but they knew the stakes were too high to give up. Over time, they noticed subtle changes in the Kailari's demeanor. Suspicion gave way to curiosity, and hostility softened into cautious optimism. To strengthen their case, Daniel suggested involving representatives from neutral factions within the Concord Alliance. If we can show that not all aliens support the war, it might sway public opinion on both sides, he explained. Kael'thar agreed, arranging meetings with ambassadors from various species. These discussions were tense at first, with decades of mistrust simmering beneath the surface. But as days passed, common ground began to emerge. Shared experiences of loss and suffering bridged gaps that once seemed insurmountable. Rachel played a crucial role in these talks, using her skills as a communicator to translate complex emotions into simple truths. She emphasized the universality of grief, reminding everyone that pain knows no boundaries, not of species, culture, or language. Her efforts earned her the respect of both humans and aliens alike. Despite these small victories, danger loomed on the horizon. A rogue faction within the Concord Alliance, led by a militant Zirakian commander named Vraxtor, viewed the negotiations as a betrayal. To Vraxtor, peace was weakness, and compromise was surrender. Determined to derail the talks, he secretly amassed a fleet, planning to attack the Kailari space station. Unaware of the impending threat, Daniel and Rachel focused on finalizing their proposal for a ceasefire. They drafted a document outlining steps toward reconciliation, including resource-sharing agreements, cultural exchange programs, and joint efforts to rebuild devastated regions. It was ambitious, perhaps overly optimistic, but it represented a beacon of hope in a darkening galaxy. As they prepared to present their plan to Kael'thar, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed, signaling an incoming assault. Chaos erupted as Kalari guards scrambled to defend their home. Daniel and Rachel rushed to the command center, where Kael'thar awaited them. "It is Vraxtor," the elder said gravely. "He seeks to destroy what we have built here." "What can we do?" Rachel asked, panic creeping into her voice. Kael'thar placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have already done much. Now it falls to us to protect this fragile peace." Outside, Vraxtor's ships unleashed a barrage of fire, shaking the station violently. Explosions rocked the structure, sending debris flying. Amid the chaos, Ethan's voice crackled over the comms system. Somehow, he and his unit had intercepted intelligence about the attack and raced to intervene. "We're coming to help," Ethan shouted. "Hold on!" Daniel and Rachel exchanged a glance, torn between relief and dread. They knew Ethan's arrival would buy them time, but at what cost? As the battle raged on, humanity's fate hung precariously in the balance. Would courage and cooperation prevail, or would hatred and fear consume them all? Only time would tell. The battle for the Kailari space station raged on, a chaotic symphony of explosions, blaster fire, and desperate shouts. Inside the command center, Daniel Carter and Rachel Bennett clung to each other as the walls shook violently. Alarms screamed in their ears, and the floor beneath them trembled with every impact from Vraxtor's relentless assault. Outside, Kailari defenders fought valiantly to hold their ground, their sleek ships darting through the void like streaks of silver light. Ethan Brooks and his unit arrived just in time, their battered fighters swooping into the fray. Ethan's hands gripped the controls tightly as he maneuvered his ship toward the enemy fleet. "This is Lieutenant Brooks," he called over the comm system. "We're here to assist. Where do you need us?" A voice crackled back, calm but urgent. It was Kael'thar, speaking directly to Ethan. "Protect the docking bay," the elder instructed. "If Vraxtor breaches it, the station will fall." Ethan didn't hesitate. He signaled to his team, and together they formed a defensive line around the vulnerable entrance. Blaster bolts zipped past them, narrowly missing their ships as they exchanged fire with Vraxtor's forces. The air inside Ethan's cockpit grew hot and stifling, but he ignored the discomfort, focusing solely on the task at hand. Maria Lopez sat beside him in her own fighter, her face pale but determined. "We've got this," she said firmly, though her voice betrayed a hint of fear. Ethan nodded, grateful for her presence. Together, they weaved through the chaos, taking down enemy ships one by one. Back in the command center, Daniel and Rachel worked frantically to support the Kalari. They relayed tactical data to the defenders, pinpointing weak spots in Vraxtor's formation and identifying potential escape routes if things went south. Rachel's fingers flew across the console, her mind racing as she processed information, faster than she thought possible. Daniel stood beside her, offering encouragement and helping wherever he could. Kael'thar watched them with a mixture of admiration and concern. These humans were risking everything, not just their lives, but their futures, to fight for peace. It was a stark contrast to the image of humanity he had once held. Perhaps there was hope after all. As the battle intensified, cracks began to form in Vraxtor's resolve. His forces were strong, but they were outnumbered by the combined efforts of the Kalari and Ethan's unit. Still, the Zerakian commander refused to retreat. For him, this wasn't just about winning. It was about proving that peace was a weakness, a lie perpetuated by fools who refused to see the galaxy for what it truly was. A battleground. "Destroy them!" Vraxtor roared, his voice distorted over the comms system. "Leave nothing standing!" But even his fiercest warriors couldn't withstand the coordinated assault. One by one, his ships fell, their fiery remains drifting into the endless blackness of space. Finally, only Vraxtor's flagship remained, its massive frame looming like a shadow over the battlefield. Realizing the tide had turned, Vraxtor made one last desperate attempt to break through the defenses. He aimed his ship directly at the docking bay, intending to ram it and cause catastrophic damage. Ethan saw the move coming and acted without thinking. Pushing his fighter to its limits, he positioned himself between the flagship and the station, firing everything he had at the massive vessel. "Ethan, no!" Maria shouted, her voice breaking. But Ethan didn't respond. His focus was absolute, his determination unshakable. With a final burst of energy, his ship collided with Vraxtor's flagship, creating a blinding explosion that lit up the darkness. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, slowly, the survivors began to emerge from the wreckage. Ethan's sacrifice had saved the station and everyone aboard it. Inside the command center, the news hit hard. Rachel sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she realized what Ethan had done. Daniel knelt beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Words failed him. There was nothing he could say to ease the pain of losing someone so brave, so selfless. Kael'thar approached them, his glowing eyes filled with sorrow. "Your friend gave his life to protect us," he said softly. "His courage will not be forgotten." Rachel wiped her tears and stood up, her expression resolute. "Then let's make sure it wasn't in vain," she said, her voice steady despite the grief. "Let's finish what we started." With renewed determination, they returned to the task at hand. The ceasefire proposal needed final touches, and time was running out. Earth's leaders still hadn't responded to calls for diplomacy, and tensions among the Concord Alliance were reaching a boiling point. If they hoped to prevent further bloodshed, they had to act quickly. Daniel and Rachel presented their plan to Kael'thar, who reviewed it carefully. When he finished reading, he looked at them with a mixture of pride and caution. "This is a good start," he said. "But it will take more than words to heal the wounds of war. You must return to Earth and rally your people. Only then can we move forward." The journey back to Earth was somber. Daniel and Rachel carried the weight of Ethan's sacrifice with them, along with the knowledge that the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. As they approached the planet, they could see the scars of war etched into its surface, burnt-out cities, crumbling infrastructure, and vast stretches of land left barren by conflict. They landed in New York City, where protests continued to rage. Crowds gathered in Times Square, holding candles and chanting slogans for peace. Laura Dawson and General Hayes were there, leading the charge. When they spotted Daniel and Rachel stepping off the shuttle, they rushed forward to greet them. "What happened?" Laura asked, noticing the sadness in their eyes. "Ethan," Rachel began, her voice trembling. She took a deep breath before continuing. "He saved us. He gave his life so we could bring you this." She handed Laura a copy of the ceasefire proposal, explaining its contents in detail. General Hayes listened intently, nodding as he absorbed the information. "This is exactly what we need," he said, "but getting Earth's leaders to agree won't be easy." "We'll help," Laura promised. "Together we'll make them listen." Over the next few days, Daniel and Rachel joined forces with Laura and Hayes to spread their message. They appeared on television, spoke at rallies, and met with influential figures willing to support their cause. Their efforts paid off. Public pressure mounted, forcing Earth's government to reconsider its stance. Finally, a breakthrough came. A delegation of human representatives agreed to meet with the Concord Alliance aboard the Kalari space station. It was a risky move, but one they knew was necessary if they hoped to avoid total annihilation. When the delegation arrived, Kael'thar greeted them warmly, though his tone remained cautious. "You have taken a bold step," he said. "Now prove that you are worthy of trust." The negotiations were tense, with both sides wary of betrayal. Old grievances surfaced, tempers flared, and progress seemed painfully slow. But Daniel and Rachel refused to give up. They mediated discussions, translating emotions into actions, and finding common ground where none seemed to exist. Slowly but surely, agreements began to take shape. Resource-sharing programs were established, cultural exchange initiatives launched, and joint efforts to rebuild devastated regions put into motion. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As the talks drew to a close, Kael'thar addressed the assembled delegates. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter," he said. "One built on cooperation, not conquest. Do not squander this opportunity." The room erupted in applause, a rare moment of unity in a fractured galaxy. For the first time in years, hope flickered like a small flame in the darkness. But as Daniel and Rachel prepared to leave the station, Kael'thar pulled them aside. "There is something you must know," he said gravely. "The universe is vast, and dangers lurk beyond our sight. An ancient force stirs in the void, threatening all life. If we are to survive, we must stand together, not as enemies, but as allies." Daniel and Rachel exchanged a glance, understanding the gravity of his words. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but they knew one thing for sure. Humanity's future depended not on division, but on unity. And for the first time, they dared to believe that such a future was possible. The journey back to Earth felt different this time. Daniel Carter and Rachel Bennett sat in silence aboard the shuttle, their minds heavy with the weight of Kael'thar's warning. The galaxy was no longer just a battleground between humans and aliens. It was now a shared home facing a threat far greater than any war. An ancient force stirred in the void, something neither human nor alien fully understood. It was a reminder that survival depended not on domination, but on cooperation. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, the scars of war were still visible below. Cities lay in ruins, fields once lush with crops now barren and blackened. Yet amidst the devastation, signs of hope began to emerge. Volunteers worked tirelessly to rebuild homes, schools, and hospitals. Protesters who had once demanded peace now organized community cleanup efforts and food drives. Humanity, though battered, was showing resilience. When the shuttle landed, Laura Dawson and General Hayes were waiting for them. Laura's face lit up as she saw Rachel step off the ship, but her smile faded when she noticed the somber expressions on their faces. "What happened?" she asked immediately. Rachel hesitated before answering. "We've secured a ceasefire," she said, glancing at Daniel. "But there's more. Something bigger is coming." Daniel took over, explaining Kael'thar's warning about the ancient force stirring in the void. "It's not just about us anymore," he said. "If we want to survive, humans and aliens have to work together, not just to recover from the war, but to face whatever's out there." General Hayes rubbed his temples, clearly overwhelmed. "You're telling me that after everything we've been through, there's another fight waiting for us?" "It's not a fight we can win alone," Daniel replied. "That's why Kael'thar wants us to unite. If we don't, none of us will make it." Laura nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of the situation. "Then we need to tell people, not just here on Earth, but everywhere. This isn't just humanity's problem, it's everyone's." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Daniel and Rachel traveled across the globe, sharing Kael'thar's message with anyone who would listen. They spoke at universities, military bases, and community centers, urging people to look beyond their differences and prepare for the unknown. At first, skepticism was high. Many found it hard to believe that an existential threat loomed beyond the stars when they were still recovering from the war. But as Daniel and Rachel presented evidence, data collected by the Kael'ari, intercepted signals from deep space, and accounts from alien allies, their audience began to take notice. Meanwhile, Laura used her platform as a journalist to amplify their message. Her articles and broadcasts reached millions, sparking conversations about humanity's role in the galaxy. For the first time, people started thinking of themselves not as conquerors or victims, but as part of a larger cosmic community. General Hayes played a critical role as well. He reached out to surviving members of Earth's military, proposing the creation of a joint task force with the conquered alliance. "We've spent years fighting each other," he said during a meeting with senior officers. "Now, we need to fight alongside each other. Our survival depends on it." Not everyone agreed. Some argued that trusting aliens was a mistake, that humanity should focus on rebuilding its own defenses. But Hayes stood firm, reminding them of Ethan Brooke's sacrifice and the countless lives lost because of division. Slowly, support for the initiative grew. Back on the Kael'ari space station, preparations were underway. Kael'thar and his council worked tirelessly to rally the conquered alliance, calling for unity in the face of the looming threat. Not all factions were eager to join forces with humans, but the tide was turning. Stories of Ethan's bravery, Rachel and Daniel's determination, and the grassroots movement on Earth inspired many to reconsider old prejudices. A massive summit was planned aboard the Aurora Dawn, the same research vessel where Daniel and Rachel had first begun their mission. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy gathered to discuss the path forward. Human representatives sat side by side with alien leaders, exchanging ideas and forging bonds that had once seemed impossible. At the center of it all was Kael'thar, whose wisdom guided the discussions. "We are stronger together," he reminded the assembly. "Our strength lies not in weapons or technology, but in our ability to adapt, to learn, and to trust one another." The summit produced several key agreements. Joint exploration missions were launched to investigate the source of the ancient force. Research teams composed of humans and aliens collaborated to develop new technologies capable of defending against whatever might come. Trade routes reopened, fostering economic recovery and cultural exchange. For the first time, humanity found itself not as outsiders, but as equal partners in the galactic community. Months passed, and progress continued. On Earth, cities rose from the ashes, rebuilt with the help of alien engineering. Schools introduced courses on alien languages and cultures, teaching children to see the galaxy as a place of wonder rather than fear. In space, human and alien, ships patrolled jointly, protecting colonies and trade routes from pirates and rogue factions. Ethan Brooks became a symbol of hope and sacrifice. Memorials were erected in his honor, not just on Earth, but on alien worlds as well. His name was spoken with reverence, a reminder of what could be achieved when individuals put aside fear and acted with courage. Rachel often visited these memorials, placing flowers or lighting candles in quiet reflection. She missed Ethan deeply, but she knew his death had not been in vain. Every step toward peace, every act of cooperation, was a testament to his legacy. Daniel, too, found solace in the changes taking place. He returned to his work as an astrophysicist, now collaborating with alien scientists to study the mysterious signals emanating from the void. Together, they pieced together fragments of information, uncovering clues about the ancient force. It was slow, painstaking work, but Daniel felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. One day, while analyzing data aboard the Aurora Dawn, Daniel made a startling discovery. The ancient force wasn't just awakening, it was moving. Its trajectory suggested it would reach the edge of the galaxy within a decade. There was no time to waste. He rushed to share the news with Rachel, who immediately called an emergency meeting with Kael'thar and the Conquered Alliance leadership. "This changes everything," Kael'thar said gravely. "We must accelerate our efforts. Time is no longer on our side." Plans were adjusted accordingly. More resources were poured into research and development. Training programs for the Joint Defense Force were intensified. Public awareness campaigns emphasized the urgency of the situation, encouraging unity and cooperation at every level. Despite the looming threat, there was a sense of optimism in the air. Humanity and the Concord Alliance had faced destruction and emerged stronger. They had learned that survival wasn't about conquering others, but about working together, and though the road ahead was uncertain, they faced it with determination and hope. Years later, historians would look back on this period as a turning point in galactic history. The war between humans and aliens had nearly torn the galaxy apart, but it had also forced both sides to confront their flaws and embrace change. From the ashes of conflict, a fragile but enduring peace had emerged. Rachel stood on the observation deck of the Aurora Dawn, gazing out at the stars. Beside her, Daniel smiled faintly. "Do you think we'll make it?" he asked quietly. Rachel didn't answer right away. She thought about Ethan, about the sacrifices made by so many, and about the countless lives depending on their success. Finally, she turned to Daniel and nodded. "We have to," she said, "because if we don't, no one else will." And with that, they returned to their work, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely. The scars of war were still visible, burnt-out colonies, abandoned outposts, and fields of debris floating in the void. But something new was growing in their place. It wasn't just peace, it was understanding. Humans and aliens who had once seen each other as enemies were now working side by side, learning to trust one another despite centuries of mistrust. Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of the Aurora Dawn, watching as a fleet of mixed human and alien ships prepared for departure. These weren't warships anymore. They were exploration vessels, equipped with advanced sensors and tools designed to study the ancient force stirring in the void. Daniel felt a mix of excitement and dread as he watched the preparations. This mission wasn't just about discovery. It was about survival. Rachel Bennett joined him, holding a datapad filled with the latest research findings. Her green eyes scanned the screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We've mapped its trajectory," she said, pointing to a glowing line on the display. "It's moving faster than we thought. If these calculations are correct, we'll have less than 5 years before it reaches the edge of the galaxy." Daniel nodded grimly. "That doesn't give us much time." "No," Rachel agreed. But at least we're not alone in this. Look around you. She gestured toward the bustling activity on the bridge. Human engineers worked alongside Zirakian technicians, while Kalari scientists conferred with Earth-based astrophysicists. Everyone had a role to play, and no one seemed willing to let fear or doubt slow them down. Back on Earth, Laura Dawson continued to document the transformation taking place. Her articles chronicled the stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, farmers sharing crops with alien refugees, teachers adapting their lessons to include alien languages, and children playing games that bridged cultural divides. Through her words, she painted a picture of a world coming together, even as it faced an uncertain future. One day, Laura received a message from General Hayes. He wanted her to join him at a military base where the Joint Defense Force was undergoing final training exercises. When she arrived, she was amazed by what she saw. Soldiers from different species trained together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. Commands were given in multiple languages, translated instantly through advanced communication. Devices. This is what teamwork looks like, Hayes said proudly as he showed Laura around. Every species brings something unique to the table. Together, we're stronger than any of us could be alone. Laura couldn't help but smile. For years, she had reported on humanity's failures, the greed, the arrogance, the violence. Now she was witnessing something entirely different. Hope. Meanwhile, on the front lines of exploration, Maria Lopez found herself in unfamiliar territory. Once a medic stationed on the edges of human-controlled space, she had volunteered to join one of the reconnaissance missions into deep space. Her ship, the Eclipse, was a hybrid design built by humans and aliens working together. Its sleek frame gleamed under the light of distant stars, a symbol of the cooperation that had made it possible. Maria's role was simple, yet vital. As the team's medical officer, she ensured everyone stayed healthy during long journeys. But her duties extended beyond physical care. She also served as a mediator, helping resolve conflicts between crew members from different species. It wasn't always easy. Misunderstandings happened often, especially when cultural differences clashed. But Maria approached every challenge with patience and empathy, earning the respect of both humans and aliens alike. On one particularly tense day, two crew members, a human pilot and a Zirakian navigator, argued over the best route to take. The human insisted on sticking to established paths, while the Zirakian advocated for a riskier shortcut. Voices rose, tempers flared, and it seemed the disagreement might spiral out of control. Maria stepped in, raising her hands to calm them. "Listen to each other," she urged. "You both want the same thing, to get there safely. Let's find a compromise." After several minutes of discussion, they agreed on a middle ground, blending caution with efficiency. Maria smiled as she walked away, knowing moments like these mattered just as much as any scientific breakthrough. As the months passed, the reconnaissance missions yielded valuable information. The ancient force was unlike anything anyone had ever encountered. It didn't seem alive in the traditional sense, yet it moved with purpose, consuming everything in its path. Entire star systems had been wiped out, reduced to lifeless husks drifting in the darkness. Kael'thar called another summit aboard the Aurora Dawn to share the findings. The mood was somber as delegates gathered to hear the report. Images of destroyed planets flashed across holographic displays, each one a stark reminder of what was at stake. "We cannot face this alone," Kael'thar said, his voice steady but urgent. "If we are to survive, we must pool our resources, our knowledge, and our strength. The Concord Alliance stands ready to lead, but we need humanity's full commitment." Representatives from Earth nodded solemnly. They knew the stakes. This wasn't just about saving their own species. It was about protecting all life in the galaxy. For the first time, humanity truly understood its place, not as rulers or conquerors, but as stewards of a fragile existence. Preparations for the final push intensified. Massive space stations were constructed at strategic points throughout the galaxy, serving as bases for the Joint Defense Force. Factories churned out weapons, shields, and equipment designed to withstand whatever the ancient force might unleash. Scientists worked tirelessly to develop countermeasures, combining human ingenuity with alien technology. At the heart of it all was the Aurora Dawn, now transformed into a command center for the operation. Daniel and Rachel spent countless hours, coordinating efforts, analyzing data, and strategizing with leaders from across the galaxy. Sleep became a luxury they rarely indulged in, but neither complained. There was too much at stake to rest. One evening, as they reviewed simulations of potential battle scenarios, Rachel paused and looked at Daniel. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing enough?" she asked quietly. "All the time," Daniel admitted. "But I also know we're doing more than anyone else has tried before. That has to count for something." Rachel smiled faintly. "You're right. And maybe that's enough." Finally, the day came. The joint fleet assembled near the edge of the galaxy, forming a massive wall of ships ready to face the unknown. Pilots ran final checks on their vessels, engineers ensured every system was functioning perfectly, and commanders briefed their crews on protocols. Fear lingered in the air, but so did determination. Ethan Brooks's name was spoken often during those final moments. His sacrifice had become a rallying cry, a reminder of why they were fighting, not for conquest, but for survival. Medals bearing his likeness were handed out to soldiers, and speeches honoring his memory echoed through the corridors of every ship. When the ancient force appeared on the horizon, it was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a swirling mass of energy and matter. It pulsed with an eerie light that cast shadows across the fleet. Sensors struggled to make sense of it, readings fluctuating wildly as the entity drew closer. Kelthar addressed the fleet, his voice broadcast to every ship. "Today, we stand united. Today, we fight not for ourselves, but for the future of all life. Let us show the universe what can be achieved when we set aside our differences and work together." With those words, the battle began. Ships fired, coordinated volleys, testing the force's defenses. Shields shimmered as they absorbed impacts, holding firm against overwhelming odds. Scientists monitored the results, adjusting tactics in real time based on incoming data. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Every decision, every action, was guided by collaboration and trust. Humans and aliens fought side by side, their movements synchronized, their goals aligned. Slowly, but surely, cracks began to form in the ancient force's defenses. Hours later, the tide turned. A breakthrough weapon, developed jointly by human and alien researchers, proved effective against the entity. Its energy dissipated, collapsing inward until nothing remained but silence. Cheers erupted across the fleet as the realization sank in. They had won. Against all odds, they had succeeded. As the ships returned home, celebrations broke out on every planet and station. Fireworks lit up the skies, music filled the air, and strangers embraced as friends. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as equals. Rachel and Daniel stood on the observation deck of the Aurora Dawn, watching the galaxy stretch out before them. It was vast, beautiful, and full of possibilities. They had faced destruction and emerged stronger, united by a shared purpose. "We did it," Rachel whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "Yes," Daniel replied, "and now we begin again." Together, they gazed at the stars, knowing the journey was far from over. But for the first time, they faced it with hope and unity.